Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Two Sisters and a TV. As always, thank you so much for joining me. And today I want to take a look at Family Feud, particularly the Richard Dawson era, which is the era that I grew up watching and am most familiar with. Now, Family Feud was developed between 1975 and early 1976. It made its debut on ABC on Monday, July 12th, 1976. Now, I never knew this until just a few months ago, but the original choice of who they wanted to host Family Feud was William Shatner. Very surprised to hear that. But when they were in the development stages of the show and when they were finishing it all up and planning to pick who would host it, that's who they wanted. But Richard Dawson, who was already on a Goodson and Todman game show, Match Game, and was the most popular panelist on Match Game, had already gone to Mark Goodson expressing interest in wanting to host a TV game show of his own. So Mark Goodson said that, well, the next game show that comes along, you'll be the one to have a crack at hosting it. So when Dawson found out that Shatner was the one that they were preparing to take over the hosting duties, he went to Mark Goodson and reminded him of their deal. So, of course, Mark Goodson had to pass on William Shatner, and he told Richard Dawson, well, okay, you can go ahead and try out for the part. We really didn't want Richard Dawson to have the job of host of Family Feud because he just thought that Richard Dawson might not be the best guy to host the show. I'm not really sure where he got that from. Maybe because he was kind of a smartass over on Match Game, and maybe he thought that would rub viewers the wrong way with him actually being the host of a game show. I'm not sure. That's just speculation. But anyway, long story short, Richard Dawson was named host of Family Feud. And he, of course, was only too happy to be finally hosting a game show of his own because he'd been on Match Game since the beginning in 1973. And by 1976, Match Game was the number one show in daytime television, not just amongst the game shows, but that includes the talk shows and the soap operas. Match Game was the highest rated show on daytime television for like 4 years in a row. And that's because it was so racy. Now, my mom didn't mind me watching it. I got to watch Match Game as much as I wanted to. I watched both the daytime version during the summer and when school was out. I watched the Match Game PM version on the weekends and at night after school. So, I mean, she was good with me watching it. But that show was very, very racy. You watch it now, you will see, because it's all over YouTube. There are episodes of Match Game all over YouTube. And you can see for 1970s TV, it was very, very raunchy. Some of the questions, the innuendo, it was crazy, but it was funny and it was fun. And the thing I loved about Match Game and the thing I still love about it today is how spontaneous it was. You didn't know what that bunch was going to do. You didn't know what they were going to break off into. I know there's the one episode where Betty White, all of a sudden they started playing the stripper in the background and she starts dancing. So, you just didn't know what to expect. There was a time that the Carol Burnett show crew came from next door and crashed the Match Game set. There was a time when the Match Game panelists all walked off the sets. You didn't know what was going to happen over on Match Game. And Gene Raven was the perfect host for that show. You couldn't have picked anyone better than him to host. He was just as zany as the panelists were. Sometimes even more zany. He was the perfect fit for Match Game. So I loved it. And so Richard Dawson was definitely, by 1976, the most popular panelist on the show, because whenever they got to the big money segment of the show, Richard was the one that almost all of the contestants went with to play against. The men as well, of course, the women and the men too. Every now and then someone would go with Brett Summers or Charles Nelson Riley or, Fanny Flagg or whoever. But for the most part, they would go with Richard because he gave the best answers, honestly. He was witty. He was funny. He'd been a comedian. He was a comedian in England before he came to the United States in the 50s. He was known as Dickie Dawson. And of course, he was also New Kirk on Hogan's Heroes for 6 years. He had been on Laugh-In for 2 years after Hogan's Heroes ended. He also did the new Dick Van Dyke Show. So he had a lot of experience under his belt before Match even came along. So the guy really knew how to be very humorous. He knew how to be sarcastically funny. He wasn't silly funny. He had a sarcasm to his humor. And everyone can't pull that off successfully, but he could, and he did a great job of it. So, yeah, he was already making strides on Match Game. So it kind of made sense that he would get Family Feud. And of course he did, and he was excited to have that opportunity to host his own game show. But now, contrary to popular belief, Family Feud was not a hit out of the gate. It struggled in the ratings pretty badly at one point. By late 1976, early 1977, Family Feud was not doing very well at all. It really struggled to get an audience, and there was even talks of cancellation at one point. Not seriously, but it did come up. However, the network had a lot of faith in the show. They had a lot of faith in Richard Dawson, so they decided to just, instead of canceling it, they changed the time slot, because initially Family Feud was coming on at like 1:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time. But then they switched it to 10:30 in the morning, or 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern, or 11 o'clock. No, actually, they changed it to 11 o'clock because I remember seeing it in Central Time at 10 in the morning. So, yeah, they switched it to the morning. That began to make a difference. But what really caused Family Feud to get an audience was when the summer of 1977 came along. Because the kids, like me, were out of school. You had the teachers out of school. A lot of kids were home from college. And that was when people began to discover Family Feud. And that was when the show blew up that summer. It caught on very, very quickly. It got a very big audience, and it ended up surpassing Match Game in the ratings. And it was the most popular TV show in daytime. So Family Feud, not without controversy though, because I saw a video on YouTube a few months ago, and the title really caught my eye. It's probably still there. It was titled, How Richard Dawson Ruined Family Feud. And I was kind of like, who did this video? Evidently it wasn't someone who was around in the 70s and 80s when he was on Family Feud, because if you were around back then, you would know that that's a lie. So it must be someone who came along afterward, or they don't remember that era. So I clicked on the video, checked it out, and I did not finish it because it was full of a lot of lies. People to this day, and it's incredulous to me, that people are so outraged by Richard Dawson and that kissing that he did on Family Feud. You have to remember, the 1970s, the early 80s, that was just a different time. It was a different world. People weren't so uptight about everything like they are now. I'm not saying that things were perfect back then. No, they were not. I'm not saying that things are so horrible, everything is so horrible now. But it's just kind of surprising to me to see people so outraged about the whole kissing thing. For one thing, it was a long time ago. And then next of all, do they even know the backstory of it? Well, I'm going to tell you the backstory of the kissing, because I was around for it. I remember how it all went down. Richard Dawson was not kissing women when Family Feud first started. For the first few months, he didn't kiss anyone. He kissed no panelists, no contestants. However, around December 1976, there was a lady who was on the show, and she was extremely nervous. She was so nervous she could barely play the game. And he was trying to, comfort her and trying to, ease her mind and just calm her down, but nothing was working. The lady was just literally a basket case. That's just how nervous she was. So then he said, well, I'm going to do something that my mother used to do for me when I was upset. So he gave her a kiss on the cheek. Instantly, the lady snapped out of her nervousness instantaneously. And she was able to play the game, and she did really well, believe it or not. This episode, I'm sure, is over on eBay, YouTube. I don't know which episode it was. I just know people have said that it was from December of 76, maybe November, but it was from late 1976 when this happened. But all of a sudden, everyone else on the, that particular team, within that particular family, all of the ladies on that team wanted a kiss too. And then the ladies on the opposing team, they all wanted a kiss. So that's how the kissing got started. And honestly, if you look at these YouTube videos of Family Feud, and there are a lot of them over there, some of these ladies wanted those kisses. Some of these ladies were leaning in with their lips literally puckered before he even got to them. But here's how it all went down. There were protests about the kissing in the 70s at the time. Everyone was not happy about it. Everyone was not on board. There were people who thought it was inappropriate. It was controversial. He was kissing all races of women, all ethnicities, all colors. A lot of people didn't go for that. He got hate mail. He was called the N-word lover. And, people were outraged by the fact that he was doing this. So he stopped. The network got nervous and they kind of wanted him to back off. And so he did. Richard Dawson definitely had a mind of his own, but, he went ahead and he did stop the kissing. So one morning, he decided to address the public, the viewers, and he said, we've gotten mail, we've gotten protest about the kissing. I want to know what you think. I don't want to be the one to make the decision. I don't want anyone else to make the decision. I want it to be those who are watching the show. I want you to write in and let me know how you feel about the kissing. Are you in favor of it or are you against it? Whatever the verdict is, whatever the majority says, that's what I'll go along with. So there was a letter writing campaign. We didn't write in, but a lot of people did. I think they received around 14,000 letters. I might have that wrong, but they received a lot of mail. So a lot of people did write in. There were a lot of people who, complained and they had their opposition and they expressed that. But the majority of people were in favor of the kissing. They thought it was nice. And if you look at it, it was innocent. It wasn't like he was making out with these women. These were not passionate kisses. These were little pecks on the mouth, pecks on the cheek. It was nothing that was like two people making out in a car, on the back seat of a car or whatever. It's nothing like that. So since the majority of viewers were in favor of the kissing continued. And it continued on until Family Feud ended. The Richard Dawson original version ended in 1985. Anyway, Family Feud was a mega hit. Very, very popular. It, again, like I said, was so popular in daytime that Mark Goodson made a deal with Viacom to bring it to fruition, a nighttime version of Family Feud. Because I remember watching it summer of 77. I was in love with Richard Dawson. I liked him a lot on Match Game. But when he was on Family Feud, and by the way, I didn't even know that he was on his own game show. I ran across Family Feud by accident one day. I was channel surfing. I was out of school, and I didn't even know he had his own game show. Of course, I recognized him. Oh, Richard Dawson. Oh, he's on another show. And I was very surprised, I must admit, when I saw him kiss each female. Not expecting that, but I thought it was really cute. I liked it. I thought it was funny. So, anyway, I was very disappointed when it was time to go back to school. And I was telling my mom, I'm not going to be able to see Family Feud. And she said, well, you'll have to watch it on your days off, holidays, during the summer. And I'm like, well, that's not going to be good enough. So evidently a lot of people felt that same way, shared my sentiment, because Mark Goodson created a nighttime version of Family Feud. Now, originally, the nighttime version was on only once a week, which I was fine with me. And then again, the popularity was so enormous that it became like 2 times a week, 3 times, and then it was on 5 nights a week. So there was the daytime version that was on 5 days a week on ABC, and then the syndicated version, which was on 5 nights a week. So Richard Dawson was a very, very busy man. Plus, he was still on Match Game at the time as well. He was doing the daytime version for CBS and Match Game PM at night. So he was extremely busy. He was extremely visible. And he developed a very large fan base. And he ended up hosting the Daytime Emmys in 1978. He won an Emmy that very same year on the same broadcast for Best Game Show Host. He was spoofed on SNL. They did a Family Feud skit, and Bill Murray portrayed Richard Dawson. He hosted several episodes of The Tonight Show, filled in for Johnny Carson between 1979 and 1980. So he was extremely popular, and it went to his head. Now, I loved Richard Dawson growing up. I had a torrid crush on him. I'm still very fond of him even to this very day, but I have to keep it real. All of that fame, all of that popularity, it definitely swole his head. He became impossible to work with behind the scenes. On Match Game, if you look at the episodes from early 1978, he was definitely just there, but he was not engrossed in the game. He was not involved. He was not engaged. One reason why he really was not engaged was because of that Big Star wheel that they got around March of 1978. The producers felt that it was unfair that Richard was always being picked by the contestants to play for the big money. So they got the brilliant idea to bring in this Big Star wheel. And that way the contestants would have to spin the wheel, and whomever they would land on, then that's who they would have to play with. Well, Richard took that as an insult. He took it as a personal dig. He felt that it was aimed at him. And honestly, I think that it was. I think that they were doing this because they were unhappy that he started off in game shows on Match Game. He gets his own game show, and that game show surpasses Match Game. So I think that honestly, they did it out of spite because there was really no need for a star wheel. The contestants were very capable of being able to pick who they wanted to play with. So the star wheel was obsolete. It wasn't necessary. And so he really became very withdrawn in his final months on the show. Those episodes, to me, I don't care for watching them because he was just sitting there. He was very sullen and obviously ticked off. And it was just everyone else is being zany and jovial and fun. And he's just sitting there, like a bump on a log. And it just is awkward to look at all these years later. Originally, they wouldn't let him out of his Match Game contract, but then they went ahead and let him out because he was just so problematic to deal with. They were tired of his bad attitude. And so, they let him out, and he left the show in, I'd say, the summer of 1978. So that way he was able to give his full attention to Family Feud. On Family Feud, he was very difficult. He and the producer of the show, Howard Felsher, started off as, on good terms. But as time went on, they bickered constantly, and sometimes they would bicker on camera. Richard Dawson was not above scolding Howard Felsher, scolding other members of the staff if he felt that they, gave, were wrong about an answer, or they made the wrong call about a question, or a family didn't score, whatever. He would chastise his staff on air. Again, go over to YouTube, check it out, you'll see it. Not in the beginning, but you get into like 1978 and down the line. Yeah, he was doing that regularly. It got to the point where he and Howard Felsher ended up falling out completely. And Howard was banned from the show, banned from the studio. And he was replaced with Richard Dawson's daughter-in-law, Kathy, who was married to his eldest son, Mark. So, there was a lot of drama behind the scenes. Richard Dawson was a very kind, very generous man, very kind to the contestants, although sometimes if they gave a bad answer, Steve Harvey's the same way, very similar. Richard Dawson was not above and beyond telling someone, oh, you gave a crappy answer. He didn't necessarily say it in those terms and that terminology, but he had no objections to letting someone know, okay, you really screwed up with that. That's not going to be up there. Or you really cost your family the game. But he was, for the most part, very kind to the public. But behind the scenes with his staff and the other producers, he was not easy to deal with. And it got to the point where a lot of the staff did not like working with him. And it just was very uncomfortable, very complicated. So anyway, Family Feud again, very successful. I loved my favorite episodes, still to this day, were the All-Star Family Feuds, where you'd have episodes where cast from TV shows would play against each other. Like you'd have Dallas versus Eight is Enough. You'd have the Jeffersons versus the Dukes of Hazzard. You have Three's Company versus Love Boat. Those were my favorites, and they still are. I still love to watch those. They are so much fun. They were playing for charity. They always picked a charity. Each TV show had their own charity they were playing for. But it's just fun to see these people playing against each other because you were watching them every week on TV, and there they are out of character. It's the real actual actor or actress, and they're playing against each other. It's a lot of fun. I still love those. And those are available on DVD. Go to Amazon and look it up, or you can go to Google and Google it. I have the DVD of the All-Star Family Feud episodes. They are so much fun to watch and a great trip down memory lane. But by 1983, 1984, the ratings did begin to slip because Wheel of Fortune had come along, and it was the new kid on the block in regard to game shows, and it cut into Family Feud's ratings. By that point, Family Feud did begin to kind of run out of steam. I was still watching it, of course, but it was just kind of, like I said, just becoming a little bit redundant to the viewers. It had blown up, and it had gotten to be so high. Sometimes when you get that high, the only place to go was down, unfortunately. I think that's what happened in this case. And then, of course, there was Dawson's ego. For example, there was a cover of TV Guide in 1984 with game show host on the cover. It was a cover story about game show hosts. He was invited to join the cover, to be on the cover as well, but he refused. He said the only way he would do the cover is if he were going to be on the cover alone. So TV Guide said, forget it. So by 1985, the writing was kind of on the wall. Family Feud was coming to an end. The game had really kind of been shortened. If you look at episodes from 1985, it was kind of rushed. There was a very rushed feeling to the episodes by that time. They also changed it to where the families had to get up to $400 to win the game. It started off at $200, then it jumped to $300, but then it was $400. They had to have 400 points, $400 to win the game. And it just, like I said, it definitely lost steam. And so it was canceled both on ABC and in syndication in 1985. Richard Dawson, though, in the last episode he did on, I believe, ABC, this is an ABC episode, it's on YouTube, he gave a beautiful moving speech at the end of the episode. Very, very heartwarming, very touching. I mean, Richard Dawson, again, had a big ego, and he was very difficult, and he could be petty and dramatic, but he was a very good-hearted person. He was a really good guy underneath, and he really loved doing Family Feud. I think that was the favorite thing that he did in his career was Family Feud. And he met his second wife on Family Feud, Gretchen Johnson. He met her in 1981. They had a daughter, Shannon, and they married in 1991, and they were together until Richard Dawson's passing. So Family Feud changed his life. Definitely changed his life for the better. And he did go and also go back to Family Feud in 1994. Now, Mark Goodson said that he would never work with Richard Dawson again. However, his son felt the opposite. Mark Goodson passed around 1992, and his son Jonathan took over for him in regard to all the game shows that were being produced. Well, in 1994, Ray Combs was hosting Family Feud by that point. He'd been hosting since 1988, and the ratings were not doing very well. And so Jonathan Goodson decided that he would bump Ray Combs and bring back Richard Dawson, which I was thrilled to see Richard Dawson back. But Ray Combs was done very unfairly. Now, I didn't watch the Ray Combs era Family Feud. I was just so caught up in the Richard Dawson era, I just couldn't watch the show with anyone else hosting. I have seen Ray Combs episodes since then, and he did a good job. He was a good host. Very different from Richard Dawson, but he was good. I think the difference was that while Richard Dawson really thoroughly enjoyed doing Family Feud from the heart, Ray saw it as an opportunity to move into something else. He kind of wanted to be like Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson hosted game shows in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, before he got The Tonight Show. And I think that Ray Combs thought he was going to go down the same path, and that Family Feud was just kind of a launching board for him. I don't think he took the show and the hosting duties of it really as seriously as Dawson had. A lot of people say that. And so that's the difference between the two, a real significant difference between the two of them. But regardless, it was wrong the way that he was just fired from the show, and he was devastated by it. The last episode that Ray Combs did is on YouTube as well. He didn't even try to hide his disgust by the fact that he had been let go. And when the episode ended, he did not say goodbye to any of the staff. He said goodbye to no one on the show. He left, if you notice, he just walked off stage. He went to his dressing room. I think he got his car keys, maybe a few other belongings. He hopped in his car and he drove away. 2 years later, he took his own life. He was only 40 years old. Ray Combs had been in a serious car accident. He had made some bad investments. He had lost his home. He and his wife were divorcing. He ended up being in a psychiatric hospital. And so he ended his own life. Actually, it was on June 2nd, 1996, when he took his life. Very, very sad ending. Really hate that happened to him. So Richard Dawson, of course, comes back to Family Feud. And, of course, a lot of us were just thrilled to see him back. In his first episode, he got a standing ovation, which we was very touched and moved by. Again, this is all on YouTube. The ratings were not too bad, but the O.J. Simpson trial was coming along, and that cut into the ratings for it. Pretty much everything in daytime was affected by the O.J. Simpson trial. The ratings, people still say to this day that the soap operas, the game shows, the talk shows, they have not recovered from the OJ trial. That cut into everything because people were so caught up in that trial, and that's what they wanted to see. They didn't want to see anything else, and that's what they were watching. They were turning over to CNN because CNN had wall-to-wall coverage, and that was what it was all about. So the ratings definitely were affected. And by 1995, this new Richard Dawson version had been canceled. Now, by that point, Richard had been married to Gretchen for about 3 years, and, they had a little daughter, Shannon. He was always bringing her on set, on stage. Richard Dawson was not doing the kissing anymore because he was a married man, for one thing, and he also was, he looked very grandfatherly, and he was a grandfather by that point. Plus, his little daughter, Shannon, had made him promise not to kiss any other women other than her mom. And it fit. I mean, he wasn't the Richard Dawson of 1979, so it made sense that he had stopped the kissing. I got that when, that change was, implemented in the new version. But he was invited to come back and host Family Feud yet again somewhere, I think, in the late 90s, but this time he declined. And he pretty much stayed out of show business and out of the spotlight for the rest of his life. He did an interview here and there on occasion, but for the most part, he was a family man. He was enjoying his 3 kids. He was enjoying his life with Gretchen, enjoying his grandkids, enjoying the money that he'd made hosting Family Feud. He made a barrel of money hosting that show. So he didn't have to work anymore. He was very comfortably financially. He was able to support his family. And so he spent the rest of his life just enjoying, just living. And Richard Dawson passed away. Interestingly enough, he too passed on June the 2nd. June the 2nd, 2012, at the age of 79. He died due to cancer of the esophagus. My sister told me the news about his passing, and of course, very, very heartbroken. Very, very sad to hear that he passed. Like, this was someone I watched on TV for the whole 9 years he did Family Feud. Well, first I started off watching him on Match Game. And then, of course, Family Feud. I watched him for all that time. And then, of course, I watched the new Family Feud in the 90s. So he was someone that I adored and was very fond of. I even wrote him a fan letter about 10 years before he passed away, and he sent me back an personalized autograph picture, which I still have. So Richard Dawson, very near and dear to me. But I think people should kind of chill about the whole kissing thing. I think they're taking that way too seriously, way too hard. You're looking at something that happened in 1981, 1983. You're looking at it through the lens of 2022, through the 21st century lens, which is not good. No game show host could get by with that today. There's just no way. But you have to remember that, again, this was a different era. And no one really cared. There are people who will say now, oh, I didn't like the kissing back then. Well, I'm kind of like, why didn't you write in and protest? When you had the chance, why didn't you speak up? Maybe they did speak up. I don't know. But I think to keep making all these dumb videos about how terrible the kissing was and how it ruined the show and how creepy it was, I just think that's kind of stupid. I think you should just kind of let that go. I think there are other videos that people can make and other things that people can focus on. I think that you need to just leave that in the past, in the days before the internet and cell phones and TikTok. I think you should just leave that alone and let it be. So anyway, I wanted to take some time to put my thoughts out there about the whole thing and to remember Family Feud and Richard Dawson. There have been so many other hosts to host that show since him. All the gentlemen who hosted the show, they all had their own unique spin on it. Richard Karn, Louis Anderson, and now Steve Harvey, who has been hosting for about 10, 12 years. I must give props to each one. They've all, like I said, done a good job in their own unique way. My favorite just still happens to be Richard Dawson. My heart still belongs to him. And I think it's going to be that way probably from now on. But again, it was really a lot of fun to do this episode. I kind of did it spontaneously, but I'm glad that I did. And it, like I said, was a lot of fun. It's always fun to think back on that time and those days and to reflect upon when Family Feud was a brand new show and it was all just fresh and starting out. And that's just something that, is still very, very near and dear to me. So that's going to wrap up the episode, but I want to thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, subscribe to this podcast, and thank you so much for your support and for your time. And until I'm back with something brand new, I'll see you next time.